we hear gunfire. I assume that it's a code red drill because they told us earlier in the day that we're going to be having a code red drill. I assumed it was blanks.
All the kids to go outside so they could start shooting up. So they started shooting from the first floor up because there's only 2 exits in the freshman building. So everybody started running to the other exits, but that's when the other shooter started coming up. He was legit. He just ran up the stairs, started shooting, and you could see a bunch of kids just going down that way, but stopping. But because the other shooter was coming, so everybody was screaming and stuff. We finally got out, and they started yelling at us to keep focused and pay attention ahead, the army people, because they didn't want us to see the bodies that they hid in the corner. They were putting mats over them so we wouldn't see them, but there was dust all over the floor from this weird thing they threw in there. They're trying to.
So you think there was more than? Do you think there was more than one shooter?
There's 3 shooters. That's what I hear. Definitely.
They could be practicing a code red. They talked about doing this. They even talked about police coming on and, shooting blanks, to see what would happen, and I said, it's kind of weird.
And then I suddenly saw the shooter about 20 feet from me, standing at the end of the hallway, actively shooting down the hallway, just a barrage of bullets. And I'm staring at him thinking, why is the police here? This is strange, because he's in full metal garb, helmet, face mask, bulletproof armor, shooting this rifle that I've never seen before.
As I was going down the stairs, I heard a couple shots fired. Everyone was freaking out, saying that it was a gun. And as we were walking, the whole class together, I actually was speaking to the suspect, Nikolas Cruz. And as I was speaking to him...
You were walking down the hall. He had already fired at that time.
Yes, sir, with him.
Weren't you scared?
In the moment I wasn't, because there was definitely another shooter involved, but...
Oh, you think he was not the only one?
No, definitely not.
Why do you say that?
Because when shots were fired, I saw him after the fact. So, and the shots were coming from the other part of the building. So there definitely had to be 2 shooters involved, I believe.
That's the first I've heard of that.
You said you were hoping that people would come forward and whenever there's signs. Were there any signs that you know of?
I believe there will be one. So our investigators have, that's a great question. Our investigators have certainly began dissecting social media and looking at the website and the Nikolas, I think we spell his name Nikolas, Cruz, was the killer. We want to learn. That's what these things are for. We were so much more proficient at this tragedy than we were at the airport. We took the things away. We learned. We trained.
I want to be clear to the court and to the state. This office and this defendant is prepared today and every day thereafter to plead guilty to 34 consecutive life sentences. We are prepared to do it today.
Perfectly clear.
Well, we're making it really clear right now.
Okay,
again.
that's not what we're here for. Let's move on.
Well, we know that this is a very high-profile and very difficult and sad, tragic case that has impacted our community greatly. And with the one single interaction we've had with the individual, we wanted to be able to provide the information to the public so they would know what had transpired.
A judge ruling the Department of Children and Families can release a report on their involvement with Cruz in late 2016, when someone called their hotline to say Cruz was acting erratically.
The reports themselves classify Nikolas Cruz as a vulnerable adult due to mental illness, specifically due to depression, ADHD, which would be attention deficit with hyperactivity disorder, autism, and that he was taking medication as a result of these issues.
And we're now learning more about the suspected shooter through his education plan first obtained by ABC affiliate WPLG. It shows Cruz was attending a school for emotionally and behaviorally disabled students in 2015. Administrators noting while he was making progress at the alternative school, he was reported to be distracted by inappropriate conversations of his peers if the topic is about guns, people being killed, or the armed forces.
A Broward judge ordered the release Friday of a long-awaited report paid for by the Broward County School District that investigated the services the district provided to confessed school shooter Nikolas Cruz during his time in the school system. Page after page of the 70-page report is redacted, especially when it comes to the specific personal information about Cruz's educational and behavioral experience in the Broward County schools. But Judge Elizabeth Shearer said that with all the redactions, there didn't appear to be a good reason to prevent the release of the document.
There's nothing in the redacted report which would pose any threat to the administration of justice or the defendant's right to a fair trial.
That's right. Much of this report that was released involving the specific personal information about Nikolas Cruz is blacked out. It is hidden from view. We can't read it.
I want to be clear to the court and to the state. This office and this defendant is prepared today and every day thereafter to plead guilty to 34 consecutive life sentences. We are prepared to do it today.
Perfectly clear.
Well, we're making it really clear right now.
Okay,
again.
that's not what we're here for. Let's move on.
It is clear, based on the rules of discovery, based on the Constitution, based on the defense right to have a fair trial, the subpoena, by issuing it for his medical records, invoked the jurisdiction of this court. This court has jurisdiction because it is a co-equal court. The subject matter of the records are Nikolas Cruz's mental health and medical records. That will then affect his right to a fair trial. That is before this court. The court has a jurisdiction under Section L1 to regulate sensitive matters, and those records are sensitive in their nature. As a result, this court has jurisdiction.
Judge Henning agreed, and with some minor modifications, provided the redacted version that eliminates the discussions of Mr. Cruz's personal educational records. We have no position with regard to the Sixth Amendment issues before Your Honor today. You have able counsel before you that can address those issues. So we stand on Judge Henning's order and would request that those portions be released.
Judge Henning, as you know, has already reviewed the report and redacted those parts which allow her to protect Mr. Cruz's privacy rights under HIPAA and FERPA, and at the same time permit disclosure of what would otherwise be a public document. But as it relates to the Sixth Amendment matter, the issue of how disclosure might result in the inability to seat an impartial jury here in Broward County, I think it's important to note several points. And the first one is that Judge Henning has made it very clear that her only duty was to redact out what she felt was a violation of the privacy statutes for medical treatment and for his educational purposes. But the judge very specifically ordered that everything be held confidential. And that's, made it easy for us to basically agree, because this way it's only limited, and she went through the litany of reasons why all of this should remain confidential. She limited it to attorneys, to their staff, to their investigators, and to the victims and the surviving victims' families. So she understood the need for the intense privacy that is required under here.
The information from the school board, the report, the redactions this time were made by Judge Henning. This court has done a judicial review of those redactions. The rest of the document the court can look at under the various tests that were presented to the court by the media, from Miami Herald Company versus Lewis and Florida Freedom newspapers. So I believe that the court would be in the same position, and our position would be the same, that Judge Henning made the proper redactions to the report. Looking at a subpoena for records from the Henderson Clinic on the defendant's time at the clinic. And there was an agreement between the parties that they would be turned over and there would be a confidentiality order. Judge Henning did not agree to that until she had a full hearing on it. She wanted to hear from all the parties, and she wanted to ensure that those records remained confidential. So it did not have to do with the issue that's before the court today. The public defender Mr. Frankel is correct. The public defender's office did agree that all the families would be able to obtain those type of records as long as they were subject to confidentiality orders.
And the McCrary analysis, if you read the cases, and McCrary in particular, but the other ones, Burke, the Miami Herald case, the other cases, they all deal with pre-trial discovery records. And that's important because under 11907, documents that are turned over or required to be turned over to the defendant in a criminal case become a public record. And at that stage, what the Supreme Court has said is that the criminal court can decide, by applying McCrary, whether or not those kinds of records should be released.
What she misses is that this court has an absolute obligation under the United States Constitution to protect from the dissemination of misleading or even false information. And what I'm saying to the court is the character of this report is all of those things, and it is damaging to the defense. I definitely respect the rights of the people of the right to know, and maybe it's a question where the court has to review this in camera, but you can see that this is misinformation. That's it.
I have reviewed the report prior to today in its entirety, I should say the redacted report, and all of the, as far as I can tell, all of the defendant's specific educational records have been completely redacted. In fact, 27 pages worth of redactions. In addition, the remaining portions deal with legal requirements, safeguards, technical recommendations, and refer to ESE and IEP students in general. So I do find that there's nothing in the redacted report which would pose any threat to the administration of justice or the defendant's right to a fair trial based on the redacted report in its current form. So I am going to deny your motion.
And again, this is a lengthy report, 70 pages long. We're continuing to pour through it, and we'll keep you posted.
The report first released like this, with 2/3 of it redacted, but a mistake in the format in which it was released uncovered every single detail of the lengthy report, shining a light on Nikolas Cruz's history as a student. It says Cruz showed bizarre behavior, identifying himself as an animal, and impulsive, with no sense of boundaries. But things quickly went south, socially and emotionally, failing 4 classes and earning D's in 2 others.
Of course, a lot of these details we are learning by mistake.
Details of the report mistakenly released reveal Nikolas Cruz was closely watched and monitored within the school system since age 3, describing his overall time with the school system as having a few ups and downs, but mostly positive. Spending most of his school years under special needs care, he entered Stoneman Douglas High School after showing progress, but things eventually went south. In one instance, he reportedly struggled with suicidal thoughts, drank gasoline to try to hurt himself, and would also cut himself. The report also documents his desire to be armed, asking his mother to help him get a Florida ID to buy a firearm. His mother didn't think it was cause for concern. Cruz raised enough alarm at the school he was banned from wearing a backpack. According to the report, school officials recommended he go back to a special needs school, his grades failing, but Cruz had already turned 18, which gave him the right to refuse. He did, and eventually withdrew from Stoneman Douglas in February 2017.
The report reveals Nikolas Cruz was closely watched within the Broward school system since age 3. It describes his time as having a few ups and downs, but mostly positive. Spending most of his school years under special needs care, he entered Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School after showing progress, but things got worse. In one instance, he reportedly struggled with suicidal thoughts, drank gasoline to try to hurt himself, and cut himself. The report says Cruz asked his mother to help him get an ID so he could buy a gun. His mother didn't think it was cause for concern. Cruz raised enough alarm at the school, he was banned from wearing a backpack. With his grades failing, school officials recommended he go back to a special needs school. But Cruz had already turned 18, so he refused. He eventually withdrew from Stoneman Douglas in February 2017.
I want to be clear to the court and to the state. This office and this defendant is prepared today and every day thereafter to plead guilty to 34 consecutive life sentences. We are prepared to do it today.
Perfectly clear.
Well, we're making it really clear right now again.
That's not what we're here for.